COLT is the prime figurehead of damage inflation in the game. Let's take a look at what damage inflation is, how COLT relates to it, and how COLT struggles from balancing around it. COLT is a brawler loved and detested by many. On one hand, hitting all 6 shots in a row and absolutely melting the other enemy is the greatest feeling in the world. On the other hand, you can be having the greatest time in lane as a Piper, but if you zone out for a single split second, the enemy COLT unloads all his bullets at Mach 1 and destroys you within a single attack. Well, COLT was basically like this. Even while the game was in its beta, COLT is a damage dealer who has the ability to deal heavy damage, but struggles to do this in practice due to his low accuracy. The closest comparison to him would probably be Angelo, except Angelo trades heavy damage for speed and range, which make him play completely differently and have different strengths and weaknesses. Or maybe Lou, except he trades damage for the ability to stun with his main attack, giving him strengths and weaknesses that COLT doesn't have. The point I'm trying to get at here is that COLT's problem is very unique, which is why we should look into his own kit to diagnose him of his problems. His attack is 6 projectiles that deal high total damage and low individual damage, and his super is a bigger version of that. Pretty simple, right? If we look at the numbers, each COLT attack is 720 damage per bullet, with 4,320 damage per 6-bulleted main attack, and each COLT super is 640 damage per bullet, with 7,680 damage per 12-bulleted super. This is, of course, as of April 2024. Notice the insane disparity between the bullet damage and the full attack damage? Now, let's think about the problem from the perspective of skill levels, on a case-by-case basis. Let's say you're a pro at COLT, and your enemy is your friend who just picked up Brawl this weekend. Since they don't know how to juke, you're obviously going to hit all 6 of your bullets onto him and deal that sweet, 4,320 damage. COLT obviously seems like the strongest brawler on Earth at that point. 4,320 damage per bullet? That's crazy. How about the scenario where you're at a disadvantage, playing COLT against a seasoned pro? Well, if you're lucky, you might hit 1 bullet per shot, if any at all. This brings your damage per shot somewhere between 0 and 640. Doesn't seem so broken now, does he? This gives COLT the designation of a noob stomper brawler. Noob stomper brawlers are brawlers that can only realistically reach their potential when their players are better than the enemy, and that potential is much higher than the potential he might reach against an enemy of the same skill level. Being a noob stomper brawler is bad. I'll talk about this more in depth in later analyses, but noob stompers are very hard to balance, and they almost always stay at the bottom of tier lists because of this. And don't forget, we still haven't talked about one specific scenario. The scenario where you and your enemy are evenly matched in skill. This scenario needs no further analysis, as we get all our evidence straight from competitive play. In competitive play, where you need to win, pros tend to pick consistency over inconsistency. And a team with COLT is inherently inconsistent, because the COLT's viability is fully dependent on how good the enemy team is, even when isolating that specific variable by not considering the player's skill. If you deal an average of 3,000 damage per bullet one game, but then just 1,000 damage per bullet the next game, your team is screwed if they're playing based on when your COLT was better. So, you may ask, how did they balance COLT to make him better over the years? Well, in games, there's a phenomenon known as trickle-down balancing, where the game is balanced around the competitive scene in hopes that the competitive balance will trickle down into balance in casual play. Brawl utilizes this quite frequently, and of course, since COLT's damage was low at an equal skill level, they increased his damage across the board. So now we can get one shot if we lag for even a second. COLT truly makes the game fun, except if you're against him. And this leads us to the issue of damage inflation. Damage inflation happens when health is nerfed and damage is buffed during balance changes, without the opposite happening all too much. This has a lot to do with the fact that big damage number brawlers sell better, and are generally more fun to play as. People see big damage and fast speed in YouTube videos and go, wow, I want that brawler. What this does, though, is make it a necessity to have the ability to dodge against more and more brawlers. Tanks are so bad right now because their HP advantage is negligible compared to the sheer damage that brawlers can put out against them. Under the right conditions, a Piper can 3-shot any brawler in the game. That's genuinely insane. Dodging gets more and more important, and while damage inflation does artificially increase the amount of skill needed to play competitively, it also makes these characters feel more and more unfair to play against. You can see this in the previous releases. As of April 2024, 4 of the 6 brawlers released from Chuck onwards has had a movement speed greater than normal. Anyway, this wasn't a traditional analysis, but I believe COLT's mechanics are pretty simple. What is more important, however, is his effect on the game as a whole. Thanks for watching. Watch this video. or this playlist, or subscribe.